was the decade of the 60s, and all kinds of activities were going on in Washington. Scarcely a week went by there wasn't a demonstration about something, often led by students, but frequently unions or other political groups. Also, hearings were held regularly on anti-Americanism and various topics. And of course, it was easy for me. It was actually walking distance to the Capitol to go down and sit in on those hearings. So I heard some of the Joe McCarthy hearings that were broadcast by air, and eventually some of them made it onto television. Television was just coming into the living rooms of the American people. It had been discovered long before, but it became common in the late 50s and 60s. So all of a sudden we saw politics in a whole new light, literally on the screen. And as turned out, I began to listen to a lot of congressional hearings on the tube, and that whetted my appetite for politics.
But you were also not just seeing them on the tube, but in real time. So, what impact of, say, going to the McCarthy hearings, how did that influence your thinking?
Well, it made me aware that most ministers of the gospel were much too narrow. They were not addressing problems that at least thousands of Americans were facing. The Paulist Fathers were dedicated. They called themselves apostles to Main Street. And I felt that a major part of what it means to be an apostle on Main Street is to be involved in tax work, in medical legislation, in all kinds of legislation that was being discussed at the time. And of course, I was deeply involved in debates about the pros and cons of the Vietnam War, which began to take over the consciousness of virtually all the students who talked about little else during those days. And we saw a migration of students who, at least at Catholic U, many of them came because it had a great department of education, philosophy, and theology. And because of the Vietnam War, a lot of those bright and capable students moved over to the political science department. And we went from about 35 students in the university to about 435 students. And we had a very small faculty. They couldn't hire faculty fast enough to deal with the students. So it was a very challenging time. And I found myself teaching not only in the classroom, but making friends with the students and teaching them half the night in the local pub, where great discussions went on about all aspects of politics.